Jinwoo opens the massive door, and a gust of wind rushes out, sending chills down his spine. Inside is what appears to be a throne room, and he is stunned by what he sees. The sounds and the presence within the room trigger a deep, visceral memory. The pressure he feels is on par with what he experienced in the double dungeon. Jinwoo is in disbelief, as all that intensity is emanating from a single opponent, a KN commander named Igris. With his name displayed in red, Jinwoo realizes that this enemy is unlike any he has faced before. Igris attacks with incredible speed, slicing through pillars as if they were mere twigs. Jinwoo is quickly overpowered and tossed around, overwhelmed by the sheer power and speed of this monstrous foe. Despite his own immense speed and a barrage of attacks, Jinwoo's blade has no effect on the knight's armor. He narrowly blocks an attack and is thrown back, concluding that while they may be equal in speed, Igris is far stronger. Faced with this dangerous adversary, Jinwoo doubts his chances of victory without a weapon, but he can think of only one way to pierce Igris's armor. Jinwoo stows away his dagger, and to his surprise, the knight also discards his weapons. Meanwhile, Choi calls the chairman to thank him for approving the operation. The chairman advises caution, but Choi is already well aware of the risks. This expedition is intended to assess threat levels by provoking the enemy to see how they respond. Choi explains that the last raid on Jew Island never truly ended for him. Back in the dungeon, Igris wastes no time in crushing Jinwoo. Igris hurls Jinwoo like a toy, landing a barrage of punches on him. Jinwoo crashes through a wall, stunned by his opponent's power. Despite blocking all the punches, he feels like he has lost 500 HP. Grateful for his armor, Jinwoo acknowledges that he wouldn't be alive without it. Realizing he can't outpower Igris, he decides to boost his speed instead. Jinwoo flies around, managing to push Igris back. He tries several more attacks, but it quickly becomes clear that he won't be able to keep up. Igris tosses him around even more, and Jinwoo notices that Igris's skill also increases his defense. Despite being overpowered, Jinwoo continues to fight back, and his efforts pay off when he lands a spectacular kick on Igris's head. However, Jinwoo realizes this might be bad for him, as the knight attacks with even greater ferocity. Jinwoo continues to take a severe beating, ultimately being thrown onto the throne with Igris staring down at him. Back home, Gina leaves dinner for Jinwoo and goes to study, and we also see Jinwoo's mother in the hospital. Meanwhile, Jinwoo is in terrible shape as Igris takes his sword, preparing to end Jinwoo's life. Igris ruthlessly goes in for the finishing blow, but Jinwoo slyly stops him with one hand, declaring that he hasn't lost yet and pushing Igris back. He summons his blade and manages to stab the knight through an opening in his helmet. Using all his remaining power, Jinwoo pushes Igris back and pins him against the wall. The knight tries to use Jinwoo's blade, but Jinwoo points out that his dagger doesn't change owners. It returns to his inventory, where he can summon it again. Jinwoo drives his blade through the knight's skull, but the attack is too shallow. Determined to end the battle, Jinwoo uses all his remaining strength to push the blade deeper into the knight. He unleashes every fatal strike he knows, landing the most powerful blow he has ever dealt. The knight goes completely limp. Jinwoo removes his blade, and a notification reveals that he has won the fight. Reflecting on the battle, Jinwoo realizes there was a huge gap between them in every category, concluding that his victory was a fluke. He acknowledges that even a single mistake would have cost him his life. Jinwoo then receives 4 rewards. The first is 1.5 million gold, and the second is the S-rank helmet that Igris wore. Though the key to the demon's castle was S-rank, Jinwoo has never had gear of such high quality before. The helmet boosts his stats and reduces damage taken by 15%. He also receives a runestone for the skill the ruler's hand. The final reward is an instant teleportation stone. Unable to store it in his inventory, Jinwoo wonders why he would be given one now. It wouldn't make sense to receive it after clearing the dungeon, so he speculates that the job change quest isn't over yet. Suddenly, Jinwoo is shocked to see several portals open. A notification reveals that the job change quest actually begins now. Jinwoo is instructed to survive as long as possible to earn advancement points, which are necessary for being assigned to a higher class. Unsure of what that means, he notices a timer appear, signaling that he will face infinite waves of enemies. Relieved that his opponents aren't as strong as Igris, Jinwoo believes he would have been overwhelmed in seconds otherwise. Confident in his abilities, Jinwoo charges fearlessly at the enemies, despite the large number of them. Meanwhile, the other hunters are seen flying off to Jew Island. After some time, we see that Jinwoo is still fighting as the gates keep sending out more enemies. The main goal of this quest is to last as long as possible, so Jinwoo uses his stealth skill. He manages his mana carefully to buy himself as much time as possible. However, his plan is completely ruined when a mage breaks his stealth. Jinwoo returns to fighting, but things are worse now since he can't use stealth or murderous intent anymore. He takes a sword to the back and is shocked to realize that only 5 minutes have passed. Realizing the increasing danger, Jinwoo determines that he won't be able to continue. Reluctantly, he decides to teleport out of the dungeon. But before he can, a monster knocks the stone out of his hand.